Alexander, the brilliant experimental journey.
I've been involved in art since I was a child.
This unlikely location in Santa Monica, California, just west of Los Angeles, is where Alexander, the eclectic visual artist, creates his extraordinary visual work, pioneering the integration of holography and conventional painting as an art form. Alexander evolved out of the execution of monumental sculptural work. Behind this door is his visual laboratory.
I wanted to try and project a spirituality. Already there are more ideas come from in here, and always have been, than I can possibly produce, maybe 10 times more.
Alexander began working with conventional holographic and painting techniques separately. He eventually combined them, creating a series of works he calls the Dance of the Souls.
The way that I create an artwork is really quite difficult to describe, because it varies so much from one kind of artwork to another. Unfortunately, the control is within. That is, the starting point for any artwork is an image that comes into my mind. Now, that image might be for a painting, it might be for a holographic installation, it might be for a sculpture, or in most recent times, the holographic painting. And once I get that image, I have to produce it in whatever medium it requires. And usually that image actually comes closed with the medium. That is, when I see the image, I see the medium as part of that image. There's only one way to do it. I can't create something in painting that really requires to be projected out as light in space, and so on. So each image that I get has inherent, built into it, the medium that has to be used. Now, when it's a painting, it's fairly straightforward because everything is under my control. I see the image and I start working on the canvas. I start with the painting. Sometimes I'll go right the way through and finish the whole thing. At other times, I start on it and I get so far, and all I've done really is to create a problem. And by creating a problem, that's very good, because that means that something has to come out of me to solve that problem to finish the painting. Now, usually the whole process takes place in less than a week, but sometimes I can start a painting here in Los Angeles and be in London on the other side of the world and see how to finish that painting, and therefore not be able to do it until I come back again. So it's the process varies according to each work. But even so, paintings are still the easiest thing for me to do because it's all under my control. If I want to make a holographic installation, then the whole creative process is very, very different. There are inherent structural problems in making a holographic installation. Once I've got to get the idea, I've got to get a commission or suitable funding for it, because these things are fairly expensive to do. I've then got to book a laboratory, which might be thousands of miles away. I've then got to go to the laboratory. I've got to create whatever is necessary as the artwork as part of that hologram. Then I've got to make the hologram, and it's a long, tedious, highly disciplined process. And I think I'm only able to accept that discipline because in earlier years I've been involved in sculpture, which is another highly disciplined process. You can see a piece of marble in one of the mountains in Italy, and you can see inside it the work that you'd like to have come out of it. But it's a very long process between seeing that and then carving away all the useless stuff that you don't want, so you can get to the real point of the artwork that really lies inside there and produce it and finish it. So the different processes have inherent in them a different structure which determines the rather unusual steps that one has to go to get to the end point of a finished work. get across the psychological barriers and the difficulties that I've confronted in making this particular series of works. I call this series The Dance of the Souls, and I've been trying to achieve a strong feeling of spirituality, to try and get the works themselves to project to the viewer a strong feeling of spirituality. And I found it extremely difficult to do, extremely difficult. And I've always had in mind the ability of music to reach right into one's inner core and give one this feeling of spirituality. And here am I trying to do it in paint. And I worked on the series since the middle of last year, 91, and I tried gradually to improve the communication of these works. And then finally the idea came to me to use holographic elements integrated with the paintings so that lines and forms of light would reach out from the painting towards the observer, and then sometimes past the observer, in order to get this communication that I wanted to achieve in the works.
Alexander's art studio reminded me of a scientific laboratory for visual art. Utilizing techniques invented by Lloyd Cross in San Francisco in the 1970s, Alexander now expands the boundaries of visual art, integrating holography into painting.
The hologram has become a very significant part of my work at this time because it offered the opportunity for me to be able to communicate something very strongly that I was unable to do with painting alone. And my experience in making holograms as separate entities made it easy for me then to be able to use this skill to make holographic elements as an integral part of my painting.
Utilizing the brain as a subject for a moving hologram, Alexander created a situation for himself whereby he was compelled, intellectually and emotionally, to go beyond this visually. His technical experimentation, however, is never undertaken for its own sake, but always is pushed forward by the desire to embody an idea or vision and make it visible and accessible to others.
The visual impact of my artwork is extremely important. I feel it necessary not only to create works of art, but to ensure that those works do get across to the observer. They do have an impact on the observer. Probably one of the best examples is The Horrors of War. In this work, you see a soldier lying prone with a gun towards you, a rifle pointing towards you. The gun and the soldier are made of barbed wire, and the head is a skull. And this comes out of what appears to be a plate of glass. It comes out 12 feet in front of the plate of glass into space. So you see this image floating in space in front of you. And it's very dramatic, very powerful. And I wanted it to be, because if we're going to make a protest against war, we've got to be able to get that sort of strong impact to people.
Alexander's studio is brilliantly experimental and enormously varied. He uses a wide range of media, including paintings, collages, sculpture, and holograms. Often his work is a mixture of these media or uses them in completely unconventional and experimental ways. Because of this, his work includes a number of characteristics which are rare in contemporary art today.
What motivates me to make a piece of art? That is the question. What causes people to have to eat, to have to drink, to have to sleep, to have to do other activities? Just as people need sleep and drink and eat and other things in their lives, I have to create works of art. I have no alternative. It's a compulsion. It's something that comes into me. I have to, once it comes into my mind, I have to make it manifest in the real world. I have no alternative. And if I'm prevented from doing this for a period of time, then I become very frustrated. It's just like keeping somebody away from food or drink or sleep. I become very frustrated and not very good to be with. So I have to produce works of art. I don't have an alternative. The way that I became involved in holography in the first place is unusual. I had been making large sculptures for public places in bronze and marble, and at that time I was able to photograph these works and send them to the galleries that represented me around the world so that they knew what to include in their next exhibitions and so on. But once I started making a new form of sculpture, which I called four-dimensional sculpture, these sculptures required movement parallax in order to be able to see the elements inside of them. And still photography, with still photography they look dead. So I thought, well, either I've got to make a video of these works, or I could use holography. And as nobody had used holography before for something that actually needed movement parallax, and movement parallax is something that holography can do, I thought I would try that. And I applied for and successfully won a scholarship in Australia to work with the great Dr. Harry Haram, and he taught me the holographic process. And my intention, of course, in the beginning, was simply to use holography as a recording process in the place of photography for my four-dimensional sculptures. But once I started using the holographic process, then I realized that it had tremendous potential as an art medium. Some people were already making holograms as works of art, but I mean as an art medium for me. And so I thought that just to use it for a recording process is terrible. I must now start to use it as a working medium in art. And so I departed from the four-dimensional sculptures and developed works that were more and more suitable for holography itself. Well, I suppose I do have an effect on the evolution in art. My latest work, for example, is something which is quite new and quite different. It's the integration of painting and holography. Another thing which is an entirely new art form are the holographic movies. I've only made 2 of them so far, but those are movies in which you can see the scene taking place in 3 dimensions without wearing glasses, and you also have movement parallax. I think the most satisfying thing that has happened to me in art is the work that I'm doing now, the work that I'm creating at this time. It certainly has been one of the most difficult areas that I've worked in, extremely difficult. I started in the middle of last year, and I made notes at the time that I wasn't sure that I was being successful. Now, it's very much unlike me to feel that it's difficult with painting, because I've always found painting easy. Sculpture is more difficult, holography is difficult, but painting I always found easy. But this, for the first time, I was confronted with a series of paintings which were most difficult to do. I was struggling. Partly in the beginning, I wasn't sure what I was trying to do, and then partly it was a matter of trying to express this thing that I wasn't sure that I wanted to do. And I was full of doubts, and found each painting very, very challenging, very difficult. I wanted to try and project a spirituality, to project to the viewer a spirituality, and to do it in the way that in the past only music has been able to do it. There is some music that is so wonderful that it reaches right into the very core of one's being and creates the most heavenly experience. And I have been jealous of the fact that music is able to achieve this result. And here was I trying with paints, with a medium so much more difficult to use to achieve this kind of effect. And yet I felt that I had to do it. I had to struggle, and I went on, and I changed the painting to try and get what I was looking for, and I made the paintings, kept making the paintings different in order to try and achieve it, but I didn't feel that I was really getting there. And then one day I was driving along the freeway, and I saw an idea. After leaving art school, I started to make paintings because I couldn't afford the material and the time to be involved in sculpture, and I had to succeed as a painter before I could become a sculptor. I then did sculpture for a number of years, and gradually I stopped doing paintings. And then a few years ago, I had to make a long trip to London, Rome, Milan, Sao Paulo, where there was a big exhibition of my work, and then back to Los Angeles. And I found that being away from my studio for so long was extremely frustrating. And out of that frustration came the urge to return to painting again. And the interesting thing is, when I came back to painting, I was looking at painting through the same eyes that I'd been using to create holographic images. And I saw then no longer just an area of activity in the plane of the wall, but I saw a whole cone of activity coming from that area on the wall to the observer's eye. And many of the paintings that I started making at that time have projections coming out 3 feet or more, sometimes 10 feet from the painting into the gallery space. And of course I've been painting continuously since then, because painting fits in very well with the more structured and difficult process of holography. Painting I can pick up and drop at any time. Holography has to be planned, I have to go to another place, have to do it, and then go back to my studio again. And I find that the two work well together. So I've been painting continuously, and I am now continuing to paint. And it's interesting that my very latest work brings together holography and painting into one integrated form. Two things make me produce a piece of art. One is my own personal religious philosophical outlook on life, which has a tremendous bearing on all the images that I produce. I believe that there is one God, one powerful universal force, and that is within all people. And I feel this very strongly. I also feel very strongly about caring for the environment, and sometimes these two things come together in my works, particularly in a large commission that I had last year, in which I brought together the theme of the Spirit of God and the concern for our environment. Those are the philosophical things that affect my work. But there is another factor, and this is a very personal one, and that is that I produce works when the ideas come into my head. I couldn't produce an artwork by just sitting down and saying, oh, I've got to do something, I'll draw this, or so on. And I find it very difficult sometimes to produce an artwork to meet somebody's very specific requirement. The artworks that I do are generated from within. I see an image, a vision in my mind, and when I see that, I have to create it. That is both good and bad. It's good in that it does produce for me a tremendous fund of imagery, more ideas than I can possibly produce with the time that I have available. But it's also bad because sometimes I've developed and become very successful in an art form. For example, by 1980, I was recognized as making some of the largest sculptures that were used in public places. And at that stage, I could get commissions for large works quite easily. But unfortunately, one morning, ideas came into my mind for completely different and new artworks, and so I found myself creating new artworks for which there was no market and no demand. The process of creating a work of art affects me a great deal. Some parts of it are very exciting and some parts are just the opposite. When I first get an idea in my mind, a new idea, something that didn't exist in the world before, it's very stimulating, very exciting. And what I would like to be able to do is to be able to start working on the production of that immediately.
David Howard's Art Scene.